And in the spirit of not the 9 o'clock news, there's a reference for all Generation Xers like me. This is not the Saturday video. It's Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021. The reason I wanted to put out a video today is it's all about the numbers. It's the 11th of the 3rd in the British way of expressing the date. And these numbers have long been important for me, and they figure in my family a fair bit. The most notable thing for me is that last year, when we moved to the home that we're currently in, we got a new postcode, and the figures in the postcode are 11-3. So I wondered to myself what significance there might be behind those numbers. And it expressed itself last year when the scamdemic first broke, and the WHO announced for the first time that COVID-19 was considered a pandemic on the 11th of March 2020. So that's kind of interesting, 11-3. The reversal of that date is of course 3-11, which was the date of the US election in November just gone. In many ways, the less said about that, the better. A lot of people expected things to turn out different to the way they did on that particular date, myself included. But I did, at the time, consider that there was some significance to the fact that the date of it was encoded into my new postcode. Another thing that's relevant about the 11th of the 3rd, the 11th of March, is that it was the date on which my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, passed away a few years ago, on Mother's Day, ironically. So we have all these different expressions of 11-3, and I just felt to come on today and put out one of these videos. I do get inspiration for things that I want to talk about when I put these videos together. And when I first started doing them last year, this is a new style of video for me because prior to the scamdemic, I was all about researching the machinations of the music industry and putting that into my books and doing public talks about this kind of thing, talking about social engineering, talking about mind control. Of course, elements of that tie into what we're all now living. But I do remember thinking when I first started putting these weekly videos out, what if I run out of inspiration? Surely I've said everything there is to say now. I pour my heart and my soul into each of these videos. And I used to find myself at the end of one thinking, how am I ever going to find anything more to talk about? But I quickly realised that it's not something I have to worry about. There is always new stuff to talk about, and there is inspiration and intuition to draw on. So sometimes I find myself waking in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and screaming and reaching for a notepad and a pen to jot down something that's just come to me. So it's never really a problem finding new things to talk about. Also because the narrative is shifting so much, and so many things are changing. There are so many different elements of it. There's always going to be stuff to comment on. So I no longer have to worry about what the hell I'm going to put into these videos by way of content. Now, I can be a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of guy, depending on what direction the wind is blowing on any given day. But I do try to keep a positive, uplifting, inspirational slant to these videos, purely because first of all, there's enough doom mongers out there already. You know, we have dreadfest.org. We have yourchildren'sfuturesAreFucked.net. We don't really need me adding to the fear that's being put out by these kind of sites and these kind of people. And I still get the emails, you know, I'm still getting the messages. Oh my God, Mark, have you seen what they plan to do? Oh my God, look what's coming in next month. We're finished. This is it now. This is the full New World Order push. You know, there's nothing we can do. My God, you know, you've got to tell people about this. You've got to do something. For God's sake, do something. Yeah, because I've just been sitting around on my arse for the last year, really, not doing anything. But yeah, I still get those emails. And another reason why I don't like to wallow in the doom and the dread in terms of sharing that kind of information is because I don't need it myself. I don't need those frequencies, those vibrations in my life. I don't need that fear-based stuff to sweep over me. It's difficult enough making it through certain days as it is, given all the challenges. So I don't want to add to all that stuff, as many people will be aware. So I do prefer to focus on uplifting, inspirational news and information when it's there to share. And so I thought this video could serve as something of a roundup of reasons to be hopeful, reasons to be optimistic, reasons to assume that the scamdemic narrative of the New World Order psychopaths is not entirely going the way they would wish it to. So forget and finally with Trevor McDonald, this is a different kind of roundup of reasons to be cheerful, if you like, reasons to remain optimistic, reasons to not quite reach for that length of rope and the hose pipe in the garage just yet. So let's see what we've got. So again, going back to today's date, 11th of March, and it doesn't really matter if you're watching this video after the 11th, you know, everything in it will still be relevant. But I have been contacted by somebody talking about a mass meditation, which is apparently due to take place tonight, the night of the 11th of March going into the 12th. So this person wrote to me to say, think of the shift of hope even that would occur by encouraging all who listen to you to tune in and meditate all at the same time. Numerous studies have been done to prove the effects not only on people but on society by doing this. And this person also says that they've been in contact with a number of mediums and psychics who have highlighted the dates around the 16th and the 21st of March, so going into the spring equinox. The general feeling a lot of tuned in people are getting is that big energy shifts are happening in March. Now, I am quite reticent to give out dates. There's been a whole load of this over the past year. You may have noticed a lot of people giving dates. Oh, the mainstream media is going to get taken down next Friday at 8 o'clock. Or next week, the White Hats, the Allies, are going to strike and Hillary Clinton's going to be arrested and Barack Obama's going to be arrested. Don't know if you've noticed, but it never happens in 100% of cases. So I don't want to be someone that puts dates on things and says amazing things are going to happen on such and such a date. But I feel it's worth highlighting the fact that many people around the world are evidently planning to meditate tonight, the night of the 11th, and focusing and envisioning the kind of future that we all wish to experience. The end of this evil, psychopathic control system. The full exposure of the horror and the terror that they've been involved with for so long. An end to the enslavement and the subjugation and the domination of mankind at the hands of these freak demon goons. So who wouldn't want all of that? And so if we can focus collectively on that kind of outcome, we really can bring it about. It's a very real dynamic. Why do you think the psychos go in so hard with their fear-based propaganda and mind control? Why do you think they put their occult symbolism into movies and TV shows? Why do you think they get all this stuff out there? These big shows, the US Super Bowl halftime, the Grammys, why are they all dark occult ritual fests? It's because they know that by getting large numbers of people, these massive TV audiences all around the world, multiple millions if not billions of people focusing their attention on what's going on, whether they're consciously aware of what they're doing or not, whether it's happening on a subliminal subconscious level or not, these large numbers of people are actually empowering the desired outcome on the part of the occultists by giving their attention to it. Energy goes where attention flows. So why can't we flip that dynamic, and why can't we be putting that into action for something that we actually wish to experience ourselves? How about having things on humanity's terms for a change instead of the sick cabal's terms? Wouldn't that make a difference? And if we can all play a part in bringing that about, well, what could be so wrong about that? So that's all I'll mention with regard to dates. I did feel to do it because it's 11/3. Come on, it's the numbers. I mean, with me, it's usually my birth date. It's usually 1205, 1205 that I see everywhere. And that's never stopped. But 11/3 has now joined the party. So things not entirely go in the way that the sickos would wish. The vaccines is a good example of that, it would seem. So I got alerted the other day to a story that the over 40s, people in their 40s, are now getting contacted and invited / begged to take their COVID vaccine. Well, this is interesting because initially we were told by the mainstream media that by the end of April, they hoped to have all over 50s vaccinated. So the plan was to focus on the over 50s and then from May onwards to come down the scale and concentrate on the over 40s. So they seem to be fast tracking the over 40s. Would this be because everyone over 50 has taken the vaccine and they can tick that box and it's time to move on? Or could it possibly be because there's been massive resistance, massive reticence, massive doubt on the part of large numbers of people because of the great job that the likes of us, truth/alternative researchers, diligently sharing information with science and data and testimonials from doctors and health professionals to back up what we're saying? Could it be that we've done such a great job in disseminating that kind of information that many people have been very hesitant to take the vaccine, and the powers that be are falling behind on their targets and they're starting to worry, and so now they're having to focus on the over 40s and say, wouldn't you like a vaccine? Come on, it's free. Come on, can we entice you? You know, you get a free lollipop if you come along to your surgery and take one. This to me is a good sign that things are not going as well as they might have hoped when it comes to the over 50s. A lot of talk now in the news and in terms of all the tittle-tattle and the gossip about vaccine passports. The idea that society can only open back up properly once everyone has a certificate of vaccination. Wasn't this what Bill Gates was talking about all along? Wasn't he saying stuff like this back in last March, April of 2020? We're not going to be able to get back to normal till everyone's taken the vaccine. And that's the noise that we're getting now. Things like festivals, the idea that you're not going to be able to get on a plane and go on your summer holiday until you can prove you've been vaccinated, even coming down to pubs, restaurants, bars, this kind of thing. Well, there was a ruling last month from the European Court of Human Rights that the very concept of vaccine passports, the very concept of restricting people's freedom of movement, which is a natural human right in creation, not granted by government, but granted by the creator, vaccine passports would violate human rights in this way. And that was the verdict of the European Court of Human Rights. And when you actually examine what's being said and all the noise that's being made about the idea of vaccine passports, it's looking very much as if they're not something that governments are going to try and mandate. They're not going to try and force them on people because they know they can't, because they know it violates all kinds of laws, not to mention natural rights. And so the emphasis, the onus, seems to be getting put on individual companies, corporations, and it's being left to them as to whether they choose to make this a condition of doing business with them. So I think it's going to come down to a case of airlines deciding for themselves whether they want people to show a vaccine passport or not to travel on their planes. Same thing with all kinds of travel companies. It's going to be the same thing with festivals, which I'll get to shortly. Same thing probably with pubs and restaurants and cinemas and all kinds of institutions, all kinds of hospitality venues. It's going to be down to these companies themselves whether they insist on this, and the government, of course, and the psychopaths controlling them are just hoping that it's going to become the common narrative that many of these companies do require these things, and people are going to feel coerced under duress to go out and get themselves a vaccine passport just because they're so bloody desperate to get back to some kind of normality. People are desperate to have a family holiday now. People are desperate to be able to go to the pub, go to the cinema, go to the bowling alley, do all these things that we used to take for granted and that we had a right to do because we were harming no one, right? It was a matter of individual choice, freedom of choice. But I think that's what it's going to come down to. So you may well find there are certain airlines that are going to go full out communist and hardline on this, and they're going to say no vaccine passport, no travel. There will be other airlines that will say don't bother with those jokers, fly with us because we're not insisting on this. We're perfectly happy for you to come on board. They might still try the mask bollocks and the distancing bollocks and stuff for a while until all that fizzles out, if it ever does. But, we take what we can get at this stage, and if there are going to be airlines that will take you, as a way of getting one up on the other airlines that are insisting on one of these stupid passports, well then they're the ones we need to support. Same thing with pubs, same thing with restaurants, same thing with all kinds of venues. Support the ones that aren't going full out fascist on this thing. Let's give them our hospitality, let's give them our support, and let the ones that want to be little bloody Stalins about the whole matter fizzle out and die. Let it be their destruction for being so bloody stupid, for having the audacity to try and take away basic rights and freedoms like that. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing, to see these companies fizzle and waver because they chose to be so hardline about it? So that's kind of interesting. Got a story here coming out of the Irish Independent. It's titled "Dozens of Families Take Legal Action Against Multiple Nursing Homes in Wrongful Death Claims." That's all to do with the vaccines as well. So I'll post the link to that in the show notes below. Just a thought about the vaccines. We're getting all kinds of different reports now. I'm hearing back from certain quarters that many people have taken these vaccines. I know people personally that have taken them, and I know people whose family members have taken them, and they've reported to me that they're just fine. The worst that they felt was a little prick. But enough about Bill Gates. So it doesn't seem to be harming a lot of people. On the other hand, we're also getting a whole load of horror stories from different quarters that people are quite literally dropping dead very soon after taking one of these vaccines, or developing horrific illnesses, horrific ailments. So it makes me wonder whether there are different grades of vaccine being administered out there, and if some of them may well be placebos. They may well be completely harmless, just water and not a whole lot else. And so the reports come back that the vaccine's just fine, you've got nothing to worry about. Meanwhile, the real vaccines, the deadly ones, are getting rolled out elsewhere. And it just creates confusion, it creates dissonance, people don't know what to think. If you try and claim that the vaccine is dangerous and you're risking your health in taking it, it won't be very long before someone pops up and says, "My auntie took it last week and she's just fine." So it's creating division, it's creating argument among different factions. And of course, those that would be the controllers of society love this. They love pitting certain factions of us against the others and just watching everything turn to chaos. So just a thought there about what may be going on with the vaccines. Other things worth mentioning, I'll just mention this festival that I just made a brief mention of there. I've received word of the V-Stop No Vaccine Festival taking place on the 24th of July 2021, evidently somewhere in England. Not sure of the location yet, it's being kept under wraps, but this is a good thing to see. So the organisers of this festival are saying, we're not bothering with any of that vaccination crap, come along and party, come along and enjoy some music the way we used to, the way we always should. So I'll post the link to this in the show notes below as well. At this stage you can register your interest in the festival, and when the location gets revealed you can come along and attend if you choose. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. It seems that when it comes to music festivals, sporting events, things like this, it is going to be left up to the organisers, the individual organisers of these events, as to how hardline they want to be about it. And it's simply a case of putting the ones that want to get completely totalitarian about it out of business. So they're finished. They don't survive, and they don't deserve to either. That seems to be what's going on. I've got templates for some letters that somebody has sent to me. These are templates that anyone can use if they find themselves in situations where they need to decline COVID testing or vaccines, or to challenge masks. There's a letter for each of these occasions that can be personalised to your own individual case. So I'll put the link to these letter templates in the show notes below as well. A wealth of information there. We're talking about good news, reasons to be hopeful, and Piers Morgan has been kicked off of Good Morning Britain, so that's got to be some good news. I know the claim is that he walked out, but really, who believes that? Interesting that Brian Harvey, formerly of East 17, put out quite a heart-wrenching video last week where the poor man is losing his mind. He's cracking up. I personally believe that Brian Harvey is a sincere and genuine individual. I have stayed away from that story purely because, for the most part, I just don't comprehend fully what's going on. I know there's connections from what he's saying there into the Millie Dowler phone hacking case at the hands of the News of the World. Piers Morgan had a hand in that whole thing, evidently, during his time in the world of newspapers. Brian Harvey's also calling out the likes of Tom Watkins, who was the former manager of Pet Shop Boys, Bros and East 17, as having been a paedophile. Tom Watkins died last year, interestingly, in February. Brian Harvey's got a whole lot to say about a whole lot of people as well. Many truth alternative researchers and well-known hosts are getting called out by him as well. It's a big mess, but it does all seem to be connected into the world of pedophilia, child sexual abuse, child sex trafficking. It's one big ugly mess. But Piers Morgan's name has come up in some of the videos that Brian Harvey's put out, as has Simon Cowell's name, as has Ghislaine Maxwell's name and Jeffrey Epstein's. So interesting that Brian Harvey put out a video last week saying that his life was in danger and that he was a dead man walking. This week we have Piers Morgan quitting. There's plenty of pictures doing the round you may have seen of Piers Morgan hanging out with various well-known paedophiles, including Ghislaine Maxwell. So there may be more to know on that one. Piers Morgan's always struck me as being quite similar to Tim Nice But Dim. You know, that Harry Enfield character? He's like Tim Nice But Dim, just without the nice bit. Really, he's neck and neck contesting with Matt Hancock for the title of Britain's most loathed, detested and despised man. I use the word man very loosely in the case of Matt Hancock. But imagine providing real competition to Matt Hancock for being the most despised person in Britain. That's quite some feat. Quite some achievement there, Morgan. We had the debacle, the circus this week of Harry and Meghan doing the interview with Oprah Winfrey. I won't comment too much on that, except to say that it really does appear that Oprah Winfrey was wearing one of these ankle tags underneath her boot. You may have seen photos, stills from the video, where it certainly appears as if she's got something underneath one of her boots, and it's very consistent with the idea that she's under some sort of house arrest with some sort of ankle tag on. I know we've had our hopes gotten up many times in the past over who may or may not have been arrested and who may or may not be getting rounded up in connection with various crimes, but to me it seems as if there's some validity to that one, so we'll keep an eye on it and see what goes on. Big protest events happening in many cities around the world next Saturday, the 20th of March, equinox weekend, interestingly. I mentioned this in my last video. There is a big event in London. I still don't know the location of it. It's being kept under wraps until closer to the time, but I'm sure it'd be easy enough to find out where that's taking place a couple of days before. And protests and rallies for freedom happening all over Europe and in various other parts of the world on Saturday, the 20th of March as well, channeling that spring equinox energy and putting it to good use. So as the spring comes in, it is inevitable that people are going to be getting out there and reclaiming their natural rights and freedoms, and it really makes me wonder how much longer this scamdemic can be kept up. We have an event happening in Southern California that somebody's asked me to mention. This connects into 5G. Remember 5G? That agenda is still out there. It never really went anywhere. Stop 5G International. Satellite protest march happening on the 19th of March. So that will be in the show notes below as well. Anything else I've been asked to mention here? Not really, but I did want to make a reference to the dates again on which so many of these things seem to be happening. And I referred there to the spring equinox, which is 21st going into the 22nd of March. 22-3 or 322 to give it the American expression of that date. 322, an important number in the occult calendar, and it also ties into the Brotherhood of Death, so called, the Skull and Bones Fraternity, a cult secret society coming out of Yale University. 322 is figures very much in so many of the world events that we see happening according to the numbers, and that is tied into the renewal, that cycle of rebirth that is represented by the spring equinox incoming. And it's very interesting to me that in the novel, the allegorical work of fiction that I put out last year, The Cause and the Cure, which turns out to be quite a prophetic title in terms of world events. I wonder what I knew subliminally when I was writing that book in 2019. But it is a work of symbolic, metaphorical, allegorical fiction, and I decided to set it 30 years in the past because I wanted to capture a lot of the period detail of what life was like in the UK in the early 90s. So ostensibly it is a murder mystery thriller, and it's set in the city of Oxford, where I grew up, and it's full of my recollections and my memories of what Oxford was like in 1990 going into 91. So the story starts on the spring equinox of 1990. So it's the 22nd of March 1990. And it became very interesting to me to reflect that on the 23rd of March 2020, so 30 years on from that date, that's when we had the Pfeffel making the first of his announcements.
We've got to go into lockdown, folks. Just 3 weeks to flatten the curve. And then another year and a quarter on top of that, just to be sure.
Can you imagine if he'd actually come out and announced it that way? We're shutting down for the next year and a quarter. And we want you to close your businesses, stay inside your house, don't see your family, don't send your kids to school, strap a piece of cloth over half your face, don't do anything you enjoy doing, cancel all your holidays, don't go to the pub, don't go to the restaurant, don't do anything, don't put your kids in the play park even, for the next year and a quarter, on and off, give or take. I like to think that the reaction would have been rather different if it had been expressed that way. I like to think people would have objected rather than just going along with it, as they were tricked into doing by being told it was just 3 weeks to flatten the curve. I'll leave that one there, lest I go into a rant. But yeah, interesting that it was March 2020, so it's exactly 30 years on from when all the action in this book starts. And this is all to do with consequentialism, cause and effect, karma, rights and freedoms, the way a society collectively gets what it deserves in terms of the level of consciousness that it's operating at. So if you have a society of slave-minded people who consider themselves serfs and the subjects of a control system greater than them, their daily perceived experience is going to manifest in that vein. So they're going to get that type of existence collectively. There'll be exceptions to the rule on an individual basis, but as a society, people get what they deserve. So if you capitulate to tyrants, expect a tyrannical regime in which to live. That's what this book was all about. And 30 years on, in 2020, going into 2021, we're living it. But the most interesting thing for me is that I decided to wrap up the action in this book. So you find out who the killer has been that's been committing all these murders, and all the loose ends get tied up. Everything gets wrapped up and brought together on the spring equinox of 1991. So it all comes to a head on the 22nd of March 1991. Given that so much of what I wrote in that book occurred 30 years almost to the day after this work of fiction, I've got to wonder whether anything significant is going to be in the offing for the spring equinox of 2021, 30 years on from this one. We haven't got too long to wait to discover whether it is, have we? Again, I don't like getting into dates because so many hopes have been dashed as a result, but honestly, with the spring coming in and with the feelings of optimism and renewal and hope that this passing of the seasons inevitably brings among people, I have to wonder whether the dam is truly about to break. We can only hope, pray and wait, right? And in the meantime, if you're watching this video on the 11th of March, you might want to join in that mass meditation that's occurring tonight to set the intention for what we all wish to achieve. Aren't we due better times? Aren't we due some hope? Aren't we due some fun, some enjoyment? The joy of life, the joy of just living, of being human. Don't we deserve that after what we've all been through? And shouldn't we be reclaiming that for ourselves? Shouldn't we be calling the shots? Not waiting to see what scraps the tyrants throw us from their banquet table, but taking the power in our own hands and saying, we've got this and we're going to direct where things go from this point moving forward.